Okay, this is Psych 255, Physiological Psych. First thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the syllabus. This semester, because of COVID-19, of course, all of the classes are being taught online. So one of the things that you need to note is that I am not in Arizona. I am in Lost Nation, Iowa. That's where I live. That's where my home is. Unfortunately, 6 days ago, we were hit by what they referred to as a derecho. Derecho means inland hurricane. We had sustained straight line winds of between 100 and 150 miles an hour. Knocked down a lot of our trees. There are a lot of people in my area that don't have electricity. I was lucky. We have rural, we have rural electricity, and all of our lines are underground. So we didn't lose our electricity. Everybody else, people who had poles, of course, most of the poles were knocked down, and trees fell on lines and whatnot and knocked out their electricity. But we were really lucky; we didn't lose it. We get our internet through our television service, so I have that as well. So if I seem a little distracted, it's probably because we've been trying to deal with this. It lifted our roof up, but it put it right back down on our roof. But now it's just barely attached to our house, so we're gonna have to have our roof replaced. We're gonna have to have the roof of our porch got hit by a pine tree. We have two pine trees in our front yard that look like the pine trees over at Saley Lake. Those big lodgepole pines, and one of them broke off about 15 feet from the ground, and the top of it landed on our porch, and then it rolled off. It hit and then it rolled off. Anyway, so if I seem a little distracted, it's because for the last week or so, I've been cutting branches and whatnot, and hauling them to the brush pile. So if I seem distracted, that's why I'm distracted. So we live in Lost Nation, Iowa. This is my telephone number. It's my cell phone number. If you can't get a hold of me by Zoom, I'm going to hold my office hours by Zoom. I'll send you the meeting number tomorrow because I have my first office hours at 8 o'clock in the morning. I've tried to spread it out. I'm not really sure how this is going to work. I've got 2 days where it's early in the morning, as far as you're concerned, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Of course, that's 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock where I live, because I live in the East Central time zone, and you live in the Mountain time zone. And of course, if you live even farther west, if you live in don't live on the reservation, then probably this is 7 o'clock and 9 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. I'm doing this so that if you work during the day, or you work graveyard or something, you can always get a hold of me later in the afternoon. I'm not really sure what your schedules look like. I assume none of you have to come to campus, so you can probably get a hold of me whenever. But I'm going to hold office hours, 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday at different times. Yeah, at different times. And like I said, I'll send you the meeting number. It'll be the same one over and over again, I'm assuming. The best way to get a hold of me is probably by email. And here's my email address. It's just like your email address, bbradway@denaecollege.edu. This is physiological psychology. This is a fairly complex class. I'm using the same textbook that I've used for a while. I've taught out of this textbook for about a decade and a half. It's the 8th edition now. They changed the name of it. It used to be biological psychology. It's not biological psychology. It's neuroscience something else. This is an old annotation. That's not the name anymore. Anyway, it's not, and it's not. Is it Breedlove and Watson? I've got it someplace around here. Let's not worry about that, okay? But this is the textbook that I'm using. This is the same textbook that I used as a graduate student, and I found that it was about as comprehensive as anything else, as any textbook that I had seen. Some of they're written from different perspectives. Anyway, I thought I like this textbook. Other individuals who teach biological psych or physiological psychology don't like it because it's too complex. I will make it as uncomplex as I possibly can. My background's a little different. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But there you go. That's the textbook. It is Breedlove and Watson. I think it's Breedlove and Watson. It used to be Rosenzweig, but he died back in the 90s or something. Anyway, as we are talking about this, there will be article critiques. Article critiques are really kind of important because article critique, what you do is you take a journal article about something that we've been talking about, and you look at the research that has been done or a piece of research. And then you tell me about that research, and that's what an article critique is. It's you giving me that information. And there are specific pieces of information that I'm looking for. Who did they do the research on? What were the results? Is it good results? Or does this make a lot of sense? Right now, there's a lot of argument going on. Is science good or is science not good? We've got a president that doesn't like science because he doesn't understand it. And now, of course, we're suffering from this COVID-19 pandemic, and his response to it seems to be a little bit limited. So science, how important is science? And the real question is how good is the research? So one of the things that I want you to do is article critiques with every week. So there will be 15 article critiques that you need to do. You'll also need to write me a paper, and the paper that I want you to write, it's 5 pages of text. That means if you have an introductory page, that doesn't count. If you have a reference page, that doesn't count. I need 5 pages of writing, and that turns out to be 115 lines, I think. Anyway, it's 23 lines per page times 5, and I think that's 115. Yeah, it is. It's 115. Anyway, so I need you to write me a library paper. And what I want you to write me a library paper on is, I want you to write me a library paper on whatever you think is interesting or important. If you have diabetes in your family, then you might write a paper about diabetes. If you have Alzheimer's disease in your family, you might want to write a paper about Alzheimer's disease. Until we understand these things, then we have a lot of ideas that maybe are not very accurate. COVID-19, COVID-19 is devastating. Is certainly devastating the reservation, but it's also devastating the United States. Today's Sunday, what is today? Sunday the 15th, 16th, Sunday the 16th. Today we will pass 170,000 deaths in the United States. We lead the world in the number of people that have died from COVID-19. And we can ask ourselves, why in the world is the United States ahead of everybody else? And the answer would have to be that our response has been so poor. We've done such a bad job of dealing with this. People with pre-existing conditions. Another interesting thing that I read the other day, they were saying that obesity has a lot to do with a negative reaction to COVID-19. Type A blood type is a factor. It allows more um, inflammation than type O or type B blood types, as weird as that may seem. Anyway, so you need to write a library paper, and you can write it about anything. I mean, all of you can write it on the same thing. We're going to talk about anything that has to do with psychology. So in essence, you can write a paper about like almost just about anything. As I said before, there are 15 chapters, and you need to write an article or critique for each chapter. And here are the topics in each chapter. On the right, you can see that we're going to cover just about everything. Try not to make you sick by moving around too much. There we go. So, and there are quizzes, chapter quizzes for each chapter. So those of you who are wondering, gee, do I need a textbook? The answer is, yeah, you probably need a textbook. A lot of the questions you can answer from the PowerPoint and the lecture, but being able to look it up in a textbook is probably not a bad idea. They tell us that we learn things by seeing it or hearing it 3 times. So if you read the textbook and you listen to my lecture, and then what else is there to do? And then you listen to my lecture, and then you look at the PowerPoint, that's 3 times that you've seen it. We're all different learners. Some of us are oral learners. We learn by hearing things. Some of us are visual learners. We learn by seeing it. Some of us are tactile learners. We learn it by writing it down. I was trying to learn French, and I had these tapes and they kept repeating French phrases. But I found out that I'm a visual learner. I couldn't learn French because I couldn't see what the word looked like. I wanted to see the word. I'm a reader. As a matter of fact, if I know somebody's name, and I call you by your name, in my mind, I actually see your name written out. And sometimes, if your name doesn't look like it is, if it's not spelled the way that I think it should look like, then I will mispronounce your name over and over and over again because I see it in my mind as a written out name. And of course, initially, I will see all of your names before I hear them written, but before I hear how they're pronounced. A lot of times I never learn how to pronounce people's names, as weird and strange as that is. Anyway, okay, there you go. So each quiz is worth 20 points. There are 18 chapters. Actually, there's 17 chapters, but let's not argue over 20 points. That's about 340 to 360 points. And so it's a total of 610 points. So there's a lot of points in quizzes. If you don't do any quizzes, it's going to be really hard to pass the class. If you don't do any article critiques, yeah, boy, C's about the best you can hope for. If you don't write your paper, that's 100 points. So I do all the things you're supposed to do. I know it's a lot of work, but this is a very important topic. Chapter quizzes, okay, it just tells you how to do the library paper. There you go. APA, we're going to use the APA format. I know they didn't teach you that. The English department didn't teach you that. They taught you MLA. MLA is a format. There are several different formats: Turabian, Chicago, APA format, AMA format. MLA is what the English department uses. They teach you that format, and what you can do potentially is take their format and then revise it so that it's APA. Why am I teaching you APA format? Well, if you're taking 255, you're probably a psychology major, and you're going to need to use APA format for the rest of your academic career as long as you're studying a social science, which English is not. English is a humanities. So there we go. That's a rubric. That's a rubric. And there's due dates for the chapters. As you can see, getting into October, we start doubling up some of the chapters. We're actually not going to do chapter 18 and 19, I don't think. We never quite make it that far. So we'll probably not do chapter 18 and 19. We'll probably stop at chapter 17. And that is it. Oh, my signature's off. Oh, there it is. Okay. And Dr. Lerma hasn't signed it yet. But as soon as Dr. Lerma signs, and he probably has. I just don't know what he did with them. We're having a little communication problem there since we're doing this online, and I'm away from campus. We're still trying to figure this out. Anyway, that's it. That's how you pass the class, is by doing article critiques, taking the quizzes, and by writing your paper. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 1. Chapter 1's kind of fun. You're going to hear all about I'm going to show you a picture of my second wife. Well, actually, I'm going to show you a picture of somebody that looks like my second wife. Yeah, I've been married 3 times, and I've been married to my current wife, my third wife. I've been married to her for 41 years, so it's not like I keep bouncing from wife to wife. That was only in the beginning of my life, and I've got probably we'll talk about why all of these things happened. Potentially, I will anyway. Okay, there I am. That's me. I'm Bruce M. Bradway. I do have a PhD in psychology, but as I will tell you in just a minute, I also have a bachelor's degree in English. I have an associate's degree in medical laboratory technology. I have a Master of Science in International Relations, which is a branch of political science. And I have a master's degree in psychology and counseling. So I'm fairly well-rounded. I didn't just study one thing. I studied lots and lots and lots and lots of things. So, and we'll be talking about that in just a minute. So what is biological psychology? Biological psychology seeks to explain behavior in terms of its underlying physiology, its development, its evolution, and its function. And as you can imagine, biological psychology is not just biology and it's not just psychology. It's putting a lot of different things together to try to figure out why we act the way that we do. This is very important if we're looking at individuals who are suffering from a mental illness. This is very important if we're trying to figure out how to motivate a student. This is all brand new stuff. All of a sudden, a lot of education is online. Is this going to work? It's mostly self-motivation. You either do it or you don't do it. The education in the United States is based on face-to-face, me yelling at you and you getting the work done. And if I'm not there to yell at you or you don't see my face, are you still going to do the work? And of course, as far as college students are concerned, you guys are all volunteers. You're in this class because you want to be in this class, or you have to take this class, but you're still, it's voluntary as far as you're concerned. But most education in the United States, up to from kindergarten all the way through the 12th grade, is mandatory. You have to go to school. So here we have all of these individuals. We've been able to maintain them in school. Sometimes they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do it. Then they turned 25 years old, realized that in order for them to find a job where they could actually make money so that they could feed their family, they wished that they had spent more time studying. Anyway, this is all brand new. This is all brand new stuff. I mean, we've been online. The internet was invented in 1993. It became a civilian entity in 1993. It's been around since the 70s. The United States military, especially the Air Force, was using it as a targeting system and a communication system. but it's had its civilian component since 1993. This is all relatively new. I mean, the computers didn't exist when I was in school, and it didn't exist until I was getting my PhD. Before that, I had to type everything out on a typewriter for both of my master's degrees and my bachelor's and my associate degree. And when I did research, I had to go to the library. I had to look everything up because there were no computers to look anything up on. So I had to go to a book. I had to find it, figure out what I was looking for. So the research from before the internet was not as good as it is now. And of course, everything's changing. Everything's evolving. This is really quite exciting if you're an old academic because you have access to so much information. All you have to do is yell at your phone, "Wake up, Google! Tell me what this is. Tell me this piece of information." My wife does that to me all the time. My phone doesn't have Google for some reason. I can't even get a text message. I'm not exactly sure. Our phones are supposed to be the same, but she has all these apps and she gets all this stuff, and I have no clue. My daughter keeps harassing me that I need to make sure my telephone is charged because my students need to get a hold of me in every second. But here I am. I'm looking at my telephone. And it was off. Okay. Not like anybody would call me up to this point. Anyway, okay. So we're talking about biological psychology. We're talking about how things change over time. Central premise of biological psychology is that bodily processes, particularly those of the nervous system, are the basis of our behavior. You just heard my telephone turn on. I have Sprint. So we've got the internet. That's no problem. We have electricity, where some people don't have electricity in this area. But the telephone service is kind of questionable. And I think my battery's about to die again. Oh, be darned. I need to go plug this thing in. Anyway, telephone services are very good because they knock down all the cell phone towers in the area, knocked them all down, so they're all laying on the ground in a cornfield or a bean field somewhere. And I don't know if that even communicates with you. If you've never seen a cornfield or a bean field, we have we're surrounded by a cornfield. I live in a cornfield, which is kind of fun. We have a 5-acre plot that's right in the middle of a cornfield. So we're kind of surrounded by corn. We have corn on one side, we have soybeans on the other, so it's kind of fun. Biological psychology is multidisciplinary in scope, and it draws on knowledge produced in diverse scientific fields in an effort to produce integrated descriptions of the generation of behavior. So we're looking at behavior. We're trying to figure out, why is this person depressed? What is it that has made this person depressed? Well, if the person's depressed today, it may have something to do with the fact that they have been sheltering in place since March or since January. Well, probably not January, but since March, we've been sheltering in place. People are wearing masks. You can't tell what they look like. We're supposed to keep 6 feet between us and somebody that we don't know. Well, we're not used to doing that. We're used to going to the bars and partying all night long, and that's something you can't do anymore. And so we're having problems keeping the young adults home because they don't want to do that. And they're not getting sick. The problem is that if they catch COVID-19, they bring it home and then they give it to their parents or they give it to their grandparents, and then those people are dying. Anybody with a pre-existing condition is kind of SOL, as it were. And I have a pre-existing condition. I don't have a spleen. I lost my spleen in a soccer game in 1985, and I had a heart attack in 2010. So theoretically, I should be sick. But I went down to Florida to help my son move to North Carolina the beginning of June, middle of June. And Florida at that time was just exploding with COVID-19. Now it has over 500,000 confirmed cases. Uh, and I seem to be okay. I think I'm okay. I didn't contract COVID-19 that I'm aware of. I don't really go outside very much. I eat a lot of vitamin C. I consume a lot of vitamin C. That's lemonade, vitamin C. Okay, so it's multidisciplinary, biological psychology. And that kind of fits with my pattern of study. I started out as an English teacher, then I joined the military and I became a medical laboratory technician. So I worked in the hospital for 30 years. I've studied political science and I've studied psychology as a counselor and as just a general psychologist. So who are the people that we're looking at? We're looking at people who are psychologists. Well, that's my field of study, one of my fields of study. We're looking at biologists. Biology, my goodness, that's what a medical laboratory technologist does. He looks at people's blood. He analyzes their blood. He analyzes their serum to see what chemicals are in there. He analyzes the bacteria, and of course, at this stage, when I was in the laboratory, we weren't doing very much with viruses because we couldn't identify them; they were too small. But now, of course, we can. So potentially, if I were still in the laboratory, then I would be dealing with viral infections, specifically COVID-19. I was in a coronavirus outbreak when I was stationed in Germany in the early 1980s. We had an outbreak of walking pneumonia, and they identified it as a coronavirus causing the problem. And it was really fairly serious because those kids, well, we're talking about military personnel, so they're all relatively healthy and relatively young. We had actually two people in Germany died from that, but almost the whole flight line caught it. It was really kind of curious. We had to ground all of our airplanes. Nobody could fly into Ramstein for about 2 weeks. Almost all of our air crews were sick with this walking pneumonia, which wasn't too bad. I mean, it's walking pneumonia, which means it's a pneumonia that doesn't lay you down. It doesn't do much damage to you. You can still function, but they had this god awful cough, and two air personnel died. Two airmen died. They were both on the flight line. One was a female, one was a male. Yeah, and thinking back, we didn't do any blood types on them. We didn't give them any blood, so we didn't type their blood. It would be curious to find out if they were both type A individuals. Anyway, that was a long time ago. That was what, 40 years ago, almost. Yeah, probably 40 years ago. Anyway, physiologists are other individuals that we're looking at as far as biological psychology is concerned. Engineers, of course, physiologists are looking at the structures of things. Biologists are looking at the structures of things. Psychologists are looking at the behavior of individuals. We have engineers that are looking at the mechanics of the functioning in our bodies. Neurologists, of course, are they along with psychologists are looking at the behavior and the neural response to that behavior. Um, Neurobiologists, we used to have one of my colleagues at Dene College was a neurobiologist. Dr. Wolf was a neurobiologist. Interesting lady. And there you go. It's multidisciplinary. One of the problems we have in academia today, if you decide that you want to study psychology, that's all. That's all you study. You don't study everything else. You don't study artificial intelligence. You don't study. Well, maybe you do. I have a student who is in graduate school right now. He's getting his master. I think he just finished his master's degree in industrial organizational psychology. Anyway, he wants to work for NASA looking at artificial intelligence. And the program that he is trying to get into is one where they um, are manning or they're trying to figure out how to send people to Mars. Well, it's a 3-year trip, and of course that's kind of a long time to be sitting in a tin can, flying through the cosmos. That's almost over 1,000 days that you'll be flying to Mars. And then once you get there, it's not like you can, go out and run around. The environment isn't going to support that. So how in the world are we ever going to do this? Well, we have to take all of these disparate people, pharmacologists, neuropsychologists, clinical neuropsychologists, paleontologists, anatomists, developmental neurobiologists, geneticists. We need to take all of these people, and we need to find out if they can possibly do that. I had a colleague here who was a cognitive psychologist, and according to her, cognitive psychology was the epitome of psychology because they looked at all the right things. The rest of us, the generalists, the Rogerian psychologists, we just saw things incorrectly, and we needed to just focus on cognitive psychology. But the reality is, my background is so convoluted, it's so disparate that I can see things from a lot of different perspectives. And of course, we used to have conversations about that all the time. Anyway, there you go. So biological psychology, a lot of things feed into it. So if you have interest in anatomy, if you have interest in neurology, if you have interest in evolutionary biology, if you have interest in biochemistry or immunology, then you can. Biological psychology is a direction that you can go. I'm fascinated with Neanderthal man. Neanderthal were proto-humans. They were pre-human. We are Homo sapiens sapiens. They were Homo neanderthalis. So they're somewhere before that. For the longest time, we thought that they just fell out of our gene. They didn't have anything to do with us. Cro-Magnon man came along, and fear, and did they mix? Did they have any genetic mixing? And people were saying no, of course not. They were too much of. They were the cavemen. They were too backward. Of course, we didn't have anything to do with the Neanderthal man. But now we have looked at we have mapped the Neanderthal genome, and we realize that everyone has Neanderthal genes. That's not just me because I'm a European, but that's also you, despite the fact that you uh, evolved on another continent. Um, any body that is not living in Africa today has Neanderthal genes. Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon men left Africa about the same time, and there was genetic mixing going on. In other words, you can call it marriage if you like. I don't know. They reproduced with one another. And I don't know what it looked like. I don't know if we're talking about, some kind of odd seduction at 3 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't really make any difference. But we all have, anybody that doesn't live in Africa today has Neanderthal genes. And that includes American Indians. So you probably have less than I do. Neanderthals stayed primarily in Western Europe, but they also spread into Eastern Europe, and they were all over the place. And if what we understand is true. Uh, the humans, of course, what are now modern humans, kind of spread from Africa all the way all around the world, and that includes American Indians or the indigenous peoples of uh, of the world. Anyway, you guys have Neanderthal genes, probably not as many as I have, of course, because Neanderthals seemed the last bastion of Neanderthals seems to have been in Spain and southern France. So I probably have more Neanderthal genes than you guys do. But we all do. Yeah, we all do as long as we are not from Africa today. And there's a picture of what my second wife used to look like. Well, used to. I don't know. I haven't seen her in a long time. I haven't seen her since 19. When did I see her? 1980, 1981, I guess. That's the last time I saw her. Anyway, that's what she looked like when I married her and when I saw her the last time. I found her very attractive, very, very sensual. So anyway, that's what she looks like. That's actually Mary Catherine Stewart. Stewart. She doesn't make. I don't think she makes films anymore. She was in the one about the dead guy that they try to pretend he's still alive. Weekend at Bernie's. She was in that. She was also in The Last Starfighter. She was in that movie. Anyway, yeah, that's Mary Catherine Stewart. She was in one where everybody in the world dies of some strange flu. Uh, and so she's running around Los Angeles. Um, and some people are sick, and she's not sick. She's one of the people that's not sick. And anyway, it's a really weird movie. I can't remember the title of it. Anyway, Mary Catherine Stewart looks like my second wife. Same color eyes and everything. Observation at all possible levels. This requires, okay, so we're talking about multidisciplinary looking, research. This requires analysis at many levels, from molecular to macro activity to interaction with the environment. And of course, this follows it all the way to the molecular level. Here's a lady that's entering a social situation. She may be afraid. She may be anxious to talk to people. These are people she doesn't know. What kind of a reaction does she have? Her brain has one reaction, but we can take it all the way down to her individual neurons, what happens, her anxiety. So she develops too much anxiety. How can we alleviate that? We can increase her GABA level, and of course that will take her anxiety away. As weird as that sounds. 5 viewpoints of the biology of behavior. We need to describe the behavior. We need to know what we're talking about. If this is, this is really important in this day and age of COVID-19 because depression seems to be increasing, and anxiety seems to be increasing. If you look at all the gun violence that we're having in the United States right now, is that a reaction? Is that a reaction to the political climate, or is that a reaction to COVID-19? The fact that we are tired of being isolated and not being able to talk to people. We watch things on television now. If we watch the wrong news, we may get the wrong idea about what's happening. And of course, it's your decision as to what is the right news and what is the wrong news, as weird as that may seem. Anyway, we need to describe the behavior: depression, anxiety, anger. We're seeing a lot more anger. They had a rally in Kalamazoo, Michigan yesterday. This they weren't really white supremacists. They were a group that said that the Western man doesn't need to apologize for what he has done. That we need to stop things right here, and we need to say, okay, this is where we are, so let's move forward. It's a really strange organization. I think they're called the Proud Boys, is what they're called. Anyway, they had a rally in Kalamazoo, Michigan yesterday, and of course, a group that doesn't like that idea uh, confronted them, and of course, it broke into a fight, into violence. There were guns and well, there were knives and clubs. People were getting hurt. Somebody pulled a gun, and of course, the police stepped in and they arrested a bunch of individuals, but they won't say who they arrested. Really kind of interesting. Anyway, so we have anger, we have anxiety, we have a lot of depression going on. We need to study the evolution of the behavior. Is this something new? Is this new behavior? Do they have anger issues? Have they always had anger issues? We need to look at that. Observe the development of the behavior. I mean, if we're talking about somebody who has a whole house full of weapons, is this somebody who is afraid that society is going to take away their freedom? We need to look at where all of this comes from. Is this new behavior, or is this behavior that we've seen in the past? Observing the development of the behavior and its biological characteristics over the lifespan. That's what I was just talking about. Studying the biological mechanisms of the behavior as they get older. And of course, we're going to talk about testosterone toward the end of the chapter. And that's the biological mechanisms that may have something to do with aggression. Number 5, studying applications of biological psychology. And sadly, when we're talking about psychology, we rarely talk about what is working good, what is making us more resilient, what is making us happy. We normally are looking at things like anxiety and depression and anger issues. We're looking at dysfunctions, or we're looking at lack of function. Why can't this person get up and go to work in the morning? We're looking at negative things, unfortunately. And of course, my branch of psychology is positive psychology. So we try to identify what makes things work, not what dysfunctions there are. And of course, as a counselor, we see dysfunctions as a malfunction that needs to be fixed. But too much of psychology has focused on the negative, and it has ignored the positive. Before a scientist can do any research on biological function, they must decide and describe the function that they will research. Greed. What was I reading? Oh, I was reading about the Yukon gold strike at the turn of the 20th century. One of the individuals that went up there was Jack London, the individual that wrote Call of the Wild and White Fang. Anyway, yeah, he went up there and he suffered for 18 months up there. He almost died, and when he came back, he started writing. He was a journalist before he went up there, and he started writing about his adventure. And he made lots and lots of money by talking about his adventures up in the gold strikes. But some really negative things happened. There was lawlessness, there was paranoia, and there was a lot of greed. Why in the world would anybody put themselves through such hell in order to potentially become a wealthy person? Uh, there there were hardly any ethics involved. So one of the questions, greed is one of the things that we can talk about. We see greed in just about every population. Even it's really kind of interesting because communism, when Bolshevism first started in 1917 with the Russian Revolution, and then we look at communism as it evolved, we see a society where money wasn't very important because everybody got the same thing. So they'd pile everything up and everybody got their equal share. That was the idea anyway. But it didn't work out that way. So when Russia or when the Soviet Union collapsed, all of a sudden we've got all of these billionaires and the Russian mafia coming out of what used to be the Soviet Union. Uh, so these individuals who had lived under the Soviet system, and theoretically they learned this in school. They learned communism, they learned socialism, but they didn't practice it in reality. They wanted to be greedy and rich, and that's one of the arguments about the Soviet or about Russia today is the fact that they're so greedy and they want to control things, which is really kind of interesting. Anyway, of course I have this picture that deals with the turn of the 20th century. By comparing species, scientists can speculate how behavior and neural structures have changed as species have evolved. As an individual grows, they develop the ability to respond to stimuli. As the organism becomes more and more complex and other variables are introduced, behavior and response will change. This is known as ontogeny, how an individual changes over a lifetime. And of course, we all have changed. As a matter of fact, well, my goodness, I've been married 3 times. Where is she? There she is. Okay, that's my second wife. My first wife didn't look like this. And my current wife certainly doesn't look like Mary Catherine Stewart. Anyway, why am I talking about this? We're talking about changing over time. Okay. So potentially I've changed. What I found attractive may have changed over time. I'm 70 years old now. I was outside working this morning. I was clearing out some of our downed trees. I was working on that. And I discovered that I'm not as strong as I used to be. I don't have the stamina that I used to have. At one time, I was playing on 2 softball teams and 2 soccer teams at the same time. And sometimes I'd have 3 games in a night. And I don't know if you've ever played soccer, but it's pretty tough to play soccer for an extended length of time. I mean, the game lasts for an hour and a half. And then 2 softball games. So, I used to be able to just go out and do things. And, after about an hour today, I'm sweating like a pig, and I'm a little bit tired. So I came in and I cleaned up, and now I'm doing this lecture. The history of a species tells us the evolutionary determinants of its behavior. The history of an individual tells us the developmental determinants. And there are lots of determinants. Did you get enough food as a child? Were you a picky eater and didn't eat the nutritious food that you needed to eat? All of these things are really important. How much trauma did you have in your early life? Did you grow up in a healthy environment? Were you bullied as a child? Were you popular? That can popularity. We are social animals, and popularity can change your life. The way you look, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute. But all of these are developmental determinants. My family's fairly. I don't know if I want to say this, but they tend to be pretty smart. And all the people around us sometimes they're not as smart as we are. So a lot of times it changes things. But we're short. I'm only 5'6". So are we athletes? All of these things change the way the way that things happen to you in your life. Am I tall? Am I attractive? Am I smart? All of these things are extremely important. The scientist must regard the organism as a machine made up of billions of neurons. Why did I turn out this way, and why did my brother turn out differently? Of all my brothers and sisters, I have more education than any of them. I had a sister, she's since died, but I had a sister who had a law degree. I have, but I don't have, none of my brothers or my other sister has a master's degree. So, what was it about my older sister and me that made us get advanced degrees? What happened to my other brothers? They were just as smart as I am, and all you need to do is talk to them, and they will tell you that I'm the dumbest one in the family, as it turns out, which is kind of tragic if you think about it. I have a brother with an IQ of 160. He's different. Major goal of biological psychology is to use research findings to improve the health and well-being of humans and other animals. That is what we're trying to do. Numerous human diseases involve malfunctioning of the brain. As we know, schizophrenia, of course. There are just a myriad of problems that can cause brain malfunctions. I was just reading a book about an individual who's was one of two. She was a twin, and one of them got almost all the nutrition, and the other one got very little. So when they were born, one twin was big and robust, and the other one was small and could barely function. And she almost died. They were identical twins, strangely enough. So they looked alike, but they weren't alike because one of them was half of her brain was never developed, and the other one was real bright. So it was really kind of a strange, curious book. I mean, it was really kind of odd that one of them had one of them was so different. Ashton Kutcher is a twin. He has an identical twin, but his identical twin has multiple sclerosis, cystic fibrosis. He has a developmental problem. So they don't look anything alike, and they don't act anything alike. As weird as that is. So he grew up with a twin who had a disability all of his life. As strange as that may seem, it's kind of interesting that he turned out the way that he did. If you remember, he's the one that made that television show about punking people, which seems a little odd when one of your when you have a twin brother that has a disability that was potentially he was picked on a lot of his life. Anyway, very strange, very interesting. There are three ways to look at brain behavior relations. You can look at it as a somatic intervention. The changes in the body changes your behavior. If you're an athlete, of course, or if you have a disability, does that change the way that you react to things? And the answer is, and that was the whole purpose of the story that I was reading, was the fact that they were identical, and since they were identical, they should have had similar reactions. But because one of them had a disability, she wouldn't talk. She wouldn't say anything. She was very bright. She could talk, but she didn't talk. And the reason she didn't talk was because her father was an evangelical Christian, and when she didn't speak correctly, then he would yell at her. So she just stopped talking completely. It was really kind of an interesting story. Anyway, so changes in your body can change your behavior. Um, if you have bad teeth, you won't smile. Changes in your body changes your behavior. If you think your ears are too big, of course, you try to take the attention away from your ears or your nose or whatever you think is your ugly thing. I'll tell you what, if you're not tall, you're not average, you're below average, then there's nothing that you can do that will take people's attention away from your height, as weird as that is. Anyway, behavioral intervention, psychological changes occur, and this changes body structure or function. You become an athlete, and therefore you start developing musculature that you wouldn't develop otherwise. You become depressed or anxious, so you don't exercise at all. You stay in your house and you become obese. These behavioral, psychological changes have changed the way that your body functions. Uh, you get depressed, so you consume something that makes you feel better. Well, what makes you feel better? Something with fat in it because it has tryptophan. The tryptophan raises your serotonin level. It's a precursor of serotonin. So you eat more fat, and now all of a sudden you've gained weight because you're eating you're eating all this fatty foods instead of exercising, as weird as that is. Anyway, so behavioral intervention. Correlation, how do changes in somatic variables affect behavioral variables? And of course, that's one of the things we look at. If we increase, and I talked about this before, if we increase testosterone in a male, will it increase his sexual response? Can we cause the same effect by electrically stimulating his brain? If we cut his vagus nerve, will he lack sexual response? And I can answer all these questions. If we increase testosterone in a male, will it increase his sexual response? And the answer is yes. Freud did experiments. Freud was a very brilliant man. He was actually a neurosurgeon. He was an MD. And he was, of course, the first psychiatrist. But he had one failure, and his failure was with gay males, with homosexual males. And so his idea was, well, if we increase their testosterone level, it will increase their desire to have sex with females. Maybe their problem is because there are some effeminate males. It's because their testosterone level is so low. Maybe that is what's causing them to be attracted to males and not to be attracted to females. So he gave them shots of testosterone. And what he discovered was it did increase their sexual response. But it didn't increase their sexual response for females. It increased their sexual response for males. So it did increase their sexual response. He wasn't able to cure their homosexuality. He was the only he could cure everything except homosexuality. He was a failure. And because of that, he said that homosexuality was not a mental illness. But if you know anything about the DSM-3, the DSM-3 said that it was. Now, the interesting thing is that when I first started in psychology in the 1970s, guess which DSM we were working with? Yeah, we were working with the DSM-3. So if you look at my abnormal psychology book, it will tell you that homosexuality is a mental illness, as weird as that is. So it's a good thing that I pay attention, because if I had not taken any other psychology classes, I would think that homosexuality, of course, it says right there in my textbook, that homosexuality is a mental illness. And of course, Freud said it wasn't, and now no one else says it is. It is acceptable behavior. But yes, if we increase testosterone in a male, it will increase their desire to have sex, as weird as that is. Can we cause the same effect by electrically stimulating his brain? And the answer is yes, we can, if we stimulate the right area. If we cut his vagus nerve, will he lack sexual response? And the answer is, if we cut your vagus nerve, it will probably kill you. But yeah, he will lack sexual response. Actually, people that are quadriplegics still have, if it's a male, then he is able to have, he is able to be sexually stimulated. He can have sex, as weird as that may seem. So quadriplegics can have sex. If we put two adults of opposite sex together, will it lead to an increased secretion of certain hormones? And of course, we saw that picture before. This lady is entering a group of individuals. The reality is that we have hormonal reactions, and they are natural reactions. There's not a whole lot that we can do about it. So males and females, yeah, we're going to have some kind of hormonal secretions. Now, the reality is that society teaches us to control our sexual urges. to not respond to our hormones. That's what society tells us to do. It doesn't have anything to do with, I'm not trying to talk dirty. This is just the way that it is. So when males and females are together, yes, they will have different hormonal secretions. Can we change blood flow to the brain with select visual stimuli? And of course, this is what pornography is all about. We can change blood flow to the brain just by showing you a picture of someone who is naked, or someone in a sexual situation, or reading something that is sexual in nature. Will change the blood flow to your brain, certainly. If we change the circumstance of the interaction to include dangerous stimulation, will it cause a change in the response of the individuals? And of course, yes, it does. If we add adrenaline to the situation, then yes, uh, the response will be more intense, as it were. Looking at people with frequent sexual response, will we find higher levels of hormones? And the answer is yes. We all have different levels of hormones. Some of us have fewer, some of us have more. The interesting thing about males is that the males with really high testosterone levels, uh, they don't really exist anymore. Uh, in order to live in society, the individual that hypersexed, that had that strong sex drive, this individual didn't survive. Uh, People, they drove him out of the group. He was not able to reproduce. So, of course, uh, if you look at everybody, and of course, I'm older than dirt, but if we look at everybody in a group, all the males in a group, and we drew their blood, we would see that their testosterone levels would be pretty close to the same. Uh, a select average or a select normal. They'd be very close to that, because otherwise, I mean, the people that have too much testosterone won't reproduce because they are driven out of the group. The people with too low a testosterone won't reproduce at all, and therefore they will fall out of the gene pool, just like the other person will. Can we correlate high levels of hormones with frequent sexual response? And the answer is yes, you can. You can change your hormonal levels by frequent response. The human brain and its peripheral neuronal structures can change with stimulation from the environment. This is known as neuroplasticity. Parts of neurons called dendritic spines seem to be in constant motion and can change shape in a matter of seconds. In a very real way, other individuals can affect the change on the structure of an individual's brain. Stimulation will include neuronal growth. Lack of stimulation will retard neuronal growth. And this is something that we need to do. We need to continue to stimulate people's neuronal growth. So I need to interest you. I need to keep you stimulated so that we can change the way that you think and the way that you feel, and that's what education's all about. So the more you listen, the more attention that you pay, the more stimulation that you have, and that will induce neuronal growth. Whether you're interested in something or not, you might find you hate biology or you hate psychology, which would be sad since you have to take this class. Anyway, what we're doing is we're trying to make you, to allow you to remember these things, to remember what I am saying to you. Researchers have been able to induce the brains of human subjects to be more active by suggesting to select individuals that water that they would be dipping their hands in would be hot, because they suggested something. When they touched the water, because they anticipated that it was hot, they felt that it was hot, even though it was lukewarm or it was cold. Subjects who did not experience the suggestion had less active brain activity and reported less discomfort from the water. And we're going to talk about bacteria in your body. We are the bacteria that are in our bodies. This gets kind of interesting.
Being human. We each view ourselves as a unique and independent individual. But we're never alone. Millions of microscopic beings inhabit our bodies, and no two bodies are the same. Each is a different habitat for microbial communities, from the arid deserts of our skin to the villages on our lips and the cities in our mouths. Even every tooth is its own distinctive neighborhood. And our guts are teeming metropolises of interacting microbes. And in these bustling streets of our guts, we see a constant influx of food, and every microbe has a job to do. Here's a cellulitic bacteria, for example. Their one job is to break down cellulose, a common compound in vegetables, into sugars. Those simple sugars then move along to the respirators, another set of microbes that snatch up these simple sugars and burn them as fuel. As food travels through our digestive tract, it reaches the fermenters who extract energy from these sugars by converting them into chemicals like alcohol and hydrogen gas, which they spew out as waste products. Deeper in the depths of our gut city, the syntrophs eke out a living off the fermenters' trash. At each step of this process, energy is released, and that energy is absorbed by the cells of the digestive tract. This city we just saw is different in everyone. Every person has a unique and diverse community of gut microbes that can process food in different ways. One person's gut microbes may be capable of releasing only a fraction of the calories that another person's gut microbes can extract. So what determines the membership of our gut microbial community? Well, things like our genetic makeup and the microbes we encounter throughout our lives can contribute to our microbial ecosystems. The food we eat also influences which microbes live in our gut. For example, food made of complex molecules like an apple requires a lot of different microbial workers to break it down. But if a food is made of simple molecules like a lollipop, some of these workers are put out of a job. Those workers leave the city, never to return. What doesn't function well are gut microbial communities with only a few different types of workers. For example, humans who suffer from diseases like diabetes or chronic gut inflammation typically have less microbial variety in their guts. We don't fully understand the best way to manage our individual microbial societies, but it is likely that lifestyle changes, such as eating a varied diet of complex plant-based foods, can help revitalize our microbial ecosystems in our gut and across the entire landscape of our body. So we are really not alone in our body. Our bodies are homes to millions of different microbes, and we need them just as much as they need us. As we learn more about how our microbes interact with each other and with our bodies, we will reveal how we can nurture this complex invisible world that shapes our personal identity, our health, and our well-being.
So there you go. What they were talking about was the fact that each of us is our own biome. In other words, we are not only all the living cells that make up our bodies, but we're also all the bacteria that is in our mouths and in our guts. And all throughout our body, I mean, we are covered with bacteria, and they're good. Most bacteria are good, and that's what that was about. Some of it's bad. I mean, COVID-19 is a virus, of course, but it's not, and it's not certainly not good. But we couldn't live without our bacteria. So, I live in Iowa. Um, my wife said we're going to have corn on the cob for supper tonight, and we eat a lot of corn on the cob here because sweet corn grows very readily here. You guys eat a different kind of corn. So potentially you have different microbes in your system than I do. If you live in Mexico, you potentially eat a lot of peppers, chili peppers, habaneros, jalapenos, and whatnot. And if you live in Iowa, those well, they actually do grow here, but most people don't eat them. They eat a more bland diet. A lot of potatoes, a lot of meats, because we raise a lot of pigs and livestock. Um, we have different bacteria in our environment. You guys have a lot of horses. You have a lot of sheep. I haven't seen very many sheep up here. So the reality is, you eat mutton, and it's a rarity in this part of the world. Eat a lot of pork, eat a lot of beef. So I mean, things change, and because you eat different things, uh, you know, we have different biomes. I used to get sick every time I went to Albuquerque, and I'm not exactly sure why. I'd always get indigestion. Something about Albuquerque, something about the food in Albuquerque made me sick. I could eat in Gallup. It really didn't matter where I ate. If I got some food in, and maybe it was psychological, maybe it was psychosomatic, but I couldn't eat the food in Albuquerque. Of course, anytime I went with my wife, she always wanted to go to some place that was, it was local foods. She likes to try different foods. Doesn't always work. When people first went to Vietnam, if they tried to eat Vietnamese food, it always made them sick. They'd get a form of diarrhea. I'm not going to tell you what we called it, but it's just the way it works. It's just a different biome. Is a different food system, and you're putting different bacteria in your system, and you're feeding the bacteria in your gut with different foods. So now you understand where diabetes comes from. Diabetes comes from consuming too much of the wrong foods, too many sugars, too many complex sugars. You need simpler sugars like fructose and galactose. As long as your sugars come in that form in fruits and vegetables, then you're okay. But if it's corn syrup, if you're drinking a lot of pop, that is not nearly as good for you. Some of it, I mean, you can drink some of it, but of course, you should try to stay away from foods that potentially make you sick. Why are we doing this? All right, there we go. Using the technique of reductionism, researchers can break down the complex mechanism that leads to brain malfunctions. About 19% of all Americans suffer from some form of psychiatric disorder. That's an answer to a question on your quiz. Another 3.2% suffer from some neurological disorder. Alzheimer's disease is the fastest growing affliction in industrialized societies. That's another answer to a question on the quiz for chapter 1. Here's another answer. Severe anxiety is the number one psychological problem in the United States. Number two is alcohol and drug abuse. 15 million people suffer from alcohol and drug abuse. 16 million people suffer from severe anxiety. Now, the sad thing about anxiety is it's really hard to treat. We can raise your GABA level and make you not nearly as anxious as you were before. But the problem is that your body, because we are giving you superficial GABA, we're giving you a synthetic GABA. If you go off your medication, then guess what happens next? Well, your body hasn't been producing enough GABA to begin with, and now that now that you have stopped taking synthetic GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid is what GABA is. Since you've stopped taking it, now you're going to go back to whatever GABA level you had before. And what it's called is the rebound effect. Because we've been giving you synthetic, you're not producing as much GABA as you did as you were before. It was already too low a level to keep you from being anxious, And now your anxiety is going to get worse, as sad as that is. Depression is a little bit easier to treat. And there you have schizophrenia. There's 1.5 million people in the United States with schizophrenia. As you can see, Alzheimer's disease, 3 million people. Why is Alzheimer's disease increasing in the United States and in the world? The answer is because most people, as they get older, they have neuronal breakdowns in their brain. It's a natural aging process. People are living longer. When I was when I was born in 1949, the life expectancy when I was born was in the 50s. In the low 50s, it was like 52, 53. And the reason was because people were smoking a lot of cigarettes. And when you smoke, you give yourself all kinds of horrible problems, heart disease and lung problems. And half the population were smoking cigarettes, so people were dying in their 50s and 60s. It was very common. It wasn't that uncommon to see people die of a heart attack in their 40s when I was growing up. Strangely enough, and I know this seems kind of odd, but I've always been interested in why people die. I used to read obituaries all the time while I was growing up. And the reason was I was trying to figure out how long I'm going to live. Um, well, when I was in elementary school, people were dying if they made it to 50, that was old. If they made it to 60, it was even older. If they made it to 70s, that was really weird and rare. But now, of course, life expectancy is over 70 years old in the United States, well over 70 years old. I'm 70 right now. I should have died almost 20 years ago if I were like all the people that I grew that were alive when I grew up, as I was growing up. But I plan to live into my 90s or maybe even make it maybe past the 100-year threshold. I exercise, I eat well. Um, there's no reason I shouldn't make it that far, as long as I can survive the COVID-19. As a lab tech, I used to come in contact with the flu every year, hepatitis, all kinds, syphilis, come in contact with it, but of course not contract it. I never get sick. I never catch a cold. Um, so there's no reason that I can't make it. And I have type O blood, so there's no reason I shouldn't live into my 90s if I can stay away from this new disease. I've always thought, if there's ever a new disease out there, I'll probably contract it. But then again, like I said, I've seen coronavirus before. It's been around. SARS and MERS, of course, were coronaviruses. But I'm pretty sure we saw it back in the 1980s, so I may be immune to it anyway. That's my plan anyway. That's my illusion. I'm deluded in thinking that I'm going to live for a while. If you notice, this man's got a rat on his shoulder. I hate rodents, but he doesn't seem to mind having a rat crawl all over him. Much of the research dealing with psychology is done with other species. By comparing the reactions of other species, researchers are able to judge how humans will react in similar situations. 93% of animals used in research are some form of rodent, either mice or rats. Most of them are rats. We do use mice. Not me. I would rather not deal with that. Once upon a time, we did a lot of primate research. Most of the monkey labs and the chimpanzee labs have closed because they're too close to humans. It seems cruel. I was teaching at Fort Belknap Reservation in Montana. I was affiliated with the University of Montana. They had a primate lab at the University of Montana. They're very proud of it. And of course, they had to close it because so many people complained that the monkeys were too much like humans. It's like torturing their cousin or something. And of course, this is a joke. This is why do lab rats die? It's just a joke. It's not very funny, I guess. But There you go. 93% of animals used in research are rodents. And that's an answer to a question on your quiz as well. That's the end of the chapter. I'll see you next week because chapter 1 is all we're going to tackle this week. Next week we'll tackle chapter 2. And I'll see you next week. Take it easy. Stay safe. If you have any questions, I will have my office hours, and I'll email you the address or the number. Anyway, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do it before 8 o'clock your time. 8 o'clock your time is 9 o'clock my time, so it's not that big a deal as far as I'm concerned. I'll still have time to go outside and exercise a little bit and clean up the yard a little bit, sweat a little bit. So I'll see you tomorrow, or not. I'll see you next week. Stay safe, please. Stay safe.